Good afternoon to all parents and to each and every person joining us this afternoon to our Reimagine Parenting, our Parenting Education Symposium. And this is an event that will be exploring effective parenting strategies for digital learners given the impact of COVID-19 on our children and teens. Participants, of course, will also benefit from discussions that highlight several topics, and the number one topic here is the use of the Excellence Journal, because we are also celebrating, it's an auspicious event as well, where we have the launch of the Excellence Journal, and that will we're going to hear more about it from the author herself as an effective tool to improve student achievement, also social and emotional development amidst virtual learning requirements. And even as we have our Reimagine Parenting Symposium, I encourage you to view on Facebook. You can visit the Facebook page, Caribbean Parenting. Also, Alina Lewis, Success Coach. She is there on Facebook, and also the YouTube channel where you can view this live. You can also share it with your friends and your family. It's a very informative program. And as we're about to begin this evening's program, I want to invite our guests that are going to be on with us this afternoon. I have with me Alina Lewis. Of course, she is an education consultant. Welcome, Alina, and
Hi, thank
also
you.
Mr. Roel Hiralal, as well as he joins us. He will be making his presentation. He is also an educator of 10 years. So welcome to both of you to our
Thank you.
Reimagine Parenting Symposium.
Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you.
All right, so to get things started, as we welcome everyone for joining us, the introduction, we will be having Alina Lewis, and I want to welcome her because not only is she an educator, but she's also an advocate for education as well. And now I must also say that she has author added to the list of her many accolades, as she will present on her first publication. It is the Excellence Journal. So Alina, we're going to start off with you, and even as you're about to make your presentation, we want to congratulate you on
Thank you.
your first publication. So let's
Thank
welcome
you.
Alina.
Thank you, Pamela. I appreciate your kind words. Appreciate the opportunity to be here as we have this Reimagine Parenting Symposium as a way to commemorate the launch of the book, The Excellence Journal, the student study journal for self-directed learning. My job, of course, this afternoon is to share about the importance of journaling as a strategy for supporting student development. And even as we use this opportunity, I use this opportunity to commemorate the launch of the book. I say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tell a story this evening. And I want to start the story in 2005. Back in 2005, and imagine I have to say back, time just really goes. But in 2005, as a full-time teacher, one of the things I noticed is that after a session, after a day of school, a lot of students could not explain what they learned. They went, they got home, they came back the next day, and you would ask them, tell me about what we did in English yesterday. And for the life of them, a class full of blank spaces. And I say, certainly, I know it's not because they didn't learn well, because I was the teacher. I was in the classroom with them. They responded so well. They got their questions correct. But my, oh my, for the life of it all, they could not recall or use the information many a times hours, days, or even, although let's not say a month after, it could not be used. And so in 2005, I started a practice. And the practice was simple: engage dialogue. And this started what I call now my favorite question: how was today's session for you? Or if I'm in a meeting, how was today's meeting for you? And I'm sure anyone hearing me even share this piece of the story right now, and they've maybe been with me, they would be laughing because they know I really do it. It doesn't matter whether it's formal or it's informal. How was this for you? Why? Because when we engage dialogue after a session, after a day, after an experience, what we do is we take the person we're communicating with and we bring them into a place of reflection where we could sit, we could think, we could talk, we could discuss, we could ask questions. So in 2005, I started as a staple part of the Lewis experience in a classroom saying, how was today's session for you? And I continued on because what I realized is that students who before that time, before that practice, who did really great in class, but afterwards they couldn't tell you what was going on. No, not only could they tell me what happened that day, but when they went home, they could share it with others. If you say, hey, how was school today? What did you do in school? The practice of them having taken those couple minutes to reflect and discuss made a huge difference in the turnaround that I saw not only in their behavior, but even in their grades. Memory was improving. But by the time I got to 2011, I said, surely there must be more. Because now I wasn't a full-time teacher anymore. Now I was getting involved in student remediation and family support. And in working with parents, I found it so very interesting. I would talk to parents and say to them, hey, how is your child? How is things going for them? What's going on in school? And parents would say, Miss, I don't know. Miss, I'm not sure. And I'd be like, well, how? Do you not ask? And they would say, Miss, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to ask. And that stood out like a red flag, the sore thumb for me. I was disturbed. And I said, you know what? Let's take this principle of dialogue and let's bring it to the homes. And what I did in 2011 is I started taking the dialogue further to include family involvement. And in this way, I was saying, let's find a way to bring a communication between the child and the parents that it caused them to explore what was happening. And the tool that was used at that time in a very simple way was based on the notion of journaling. And that's why I'm so passionate about today, because not only have I read the research, but I have taken a personal and a professional journey as it pertains to journaling. And for those who are viewing, I really want to encourage moms, dads, aunties, uncles, guardians, everyone to understand that journaling results in students, children, teens, infants sharing their opinions more openly with each other. Studies show us that when children reflect, and of course, when you hear me use the word children, I might use it interchangeably, children, teens, infants. But when our kids, when they reflect on their own thinking process, what happens is that they're now able to recognize the importance of self-exploration, questioning, and connecting ideas. And even better, when this reflection is in written form, students have a source of dialogue prepared for use. So now mommies and daddies don't have to feel disconnected from their kids. They don't have to feel as though, well, I don't know what to ask. There is a template of sorts that they could use to have the prompts needed to ask the pertinent questions that are not just for general discussion, but especially the questions that we want to ask when we want to direct it towards improving student achievement. So journaling then helps students to be less restrained. Why? Because we're training them to think and to communicate and to share. So journaling then is helping the student to be less restrained when they're expressing themselves, and it gives them some time to organize their thoughts. Some children are talkers, I was one of those kids when I was young. My mom used to say, "Oh gosh, hush now, now. Stop talking now, now." I mean, of course, we laugh. I say, "Mommy, look at it. Imagine if I did hush, what would have happened?" But imagine not all children are talkers in that regard. So, especially for the children who are not talkers, who they probably need that moment to sit and figure out their thoughts. Journaling, and especially when it's encouraged by the parent, gives the child the opportunity to pull away, get their thoughts together, write it down. Not all children like to talk it out. Some children like to write it out. And we're now able to cater to all these different types of responsiveness, which in turn gives them the confidence that they need to be able to participate in classroom discussions, be able to participate in at home discussions. I'll give you a quick example. Just yesterday, I was chatting with a student, and as is my habit, I said, "Hey, what's today's session for you?" Because we're doing some remediation work. And he responded, and then I said to him, I said, "But how are things with school?" And he paused and he smiled and he said, "Miss, I just answer questions in class now." And I say, "Hey, that's my boy." You know why? Because he too is now on a journey with me where 2 weeks ago, this is the same young man who sat in front of me with his mom and dad and said, "I don't want to go to school anymore." And I say, "You know what? That's okay. I understand how you feel, but at least be willing to work with me. And I bet you, if you work with me, that feeling would change." And guess what? 2 weeks later, after having these remedial sessions organized for him, after going through his journaling process, 2 weeks later, the child who was saying, "I don't want to go to school," is now saying, "Miss, I answer questions in class and I participate and I talk with the other children now." Look at that. 2 weeks later. Why? Because we're using a process that works. Journaling, it works. It helps. And so as the years went by, we could see now through research, through individual examples, through group, I could see where this thing about journaling, it supports the child and it supports the student, the parent. So you know what happened? Some more time rolled around, and in 2017, I said, "You know what? We need to formalize this and put some pen to paper." So I started developing a prototype, because I understood clearly that journal writing facilitates reflection. And not only does it help the student to be able to talk about what they did in school, what went on with maths and English and science, but it helps them to express feelings regarding their educational experiences if directed well. And there are very few activities that could really trump journal writing for understanding and supporting the development of student thinking. So we're seeing here, and I hope you're grasping, and those who are looking on are following on with the story, where it's not just about only adopting one approach to journalizing. But remember, I said, when I started in 2005, my kids were not even writing. And of course, when I say my kids, I mean the students at my school, yeah? My kids were not even writing as yet. We were just talking. So guess what? Mommy, daddy, auntie, uncle, if you're saying that writing thing, I ain't sure if that's me. I want to encourage you. If you're listening in today and you're saying, "I want to better help my child with his or her schoolwork," but maybe you didn't go to school, maybe you have some other challenge that prevents you from getting formal with the writing, I want to encourage you to know that even if as simple as dialogue, you could implement the principles that I'm sharing by having these important conversations, prompting the kids. You might not have a book, but you might have a copybook at home. You might have an old notebook at home. Hey, use what you have. Never let what you think to be a lack of resources be a reason for you to sit back and say, "I wish I could do better, but I can't." Hey, as the adage says, where there is a will, there is a way. And so if you could move past dialogue and you could help your child put pen to paper, even if it's a blank piece of paper where they get to write out their thoughts, write their concerns, write to share what they understood, what they didn't understand, that process in itself too would help. But even from a formal perspective, after we get this prototype going in 2018, one of the things I did is that I expanded the practice to include learning and study skills development. Remember, I keep saying journal writing assignments can benefit the student by enhancing reflection, facilitating critical thought, helping them express feelings. But guess what? Children grow up differently. Some children grow up in spaces where they learn the skill of being able to settle in with their book and review and make notes because they probably see a pattern, whether at school, at their home, in another group. But there are many other students that they probably don't have that exposure. So I tell the story of the 2018 portion of my journey to say, parents, be encouraged as you support your children towards improving achievement. Also, pay attention to making sure you are intentional about including learning and study skills as part of the exposure that you give to your kids. Content is important, exams are important, but when we have a child who sits overwhelmed and don't understand to understand, I know it sounds funny, yeah, but it's a real thing. A lot of children struggle with understanding how to understand because the basic skills of learning and studying, they've not had encouraged and framed around them. So I want to encourage you, just as I have done in my journey and so many other professionals and educators do in theirs, you too at home could do your own version. Use journal writing so that you could help adapt the student development to bridge that gap. So that when you give them the opportunity to write and to look at the patterns of thought and behavior and what they did, when they did, how they did, and the results it gave, it helps them to learn how to adjust and to adapt. It works well. And of course, now we are here in 2021. And in 2021, I am recognizing and celebrating, I'll call it a formula. Celebrating a formula that says this: when we take student thought and we combine that with student journaling, and we combine that by putting in dialogue between the parent and the child, and we support parents to better support their child, do you know what we get? We get improved grades. We get increased student achievement. We get confident children. Why? Because we are helping students to be able to step in to being their best sense of self. That our kids do not have to sit and feel defeated. They do not. They do not have to sit and feel defeated. But our children can have confidence because we're helping them, we're guiding them to take them through a process where they could learn to tap into their own thoughts, tap into what they understand, be able to pull back and say, this worked. This didn't work. Mommy, I feel I want to continue doing it this way. No, Mommy, I don't like that method. I get trouble to get the answer correct. And that dialogue between the parent and child that we're able to foster because of journaling makes a huge difference in the results that you get. So here it is in 2021. I am super excited to be here on this panel, on this symposium, sharing about journaling, but also to share about the Excellence Journal, because the Excellence Journal does all this and so much more, as it gives the prompts and the templates that are needed to support, so that for the parents who want to do it, but are saying, I don't really know how to go about that. That's what the book is there for. It's there to be used as a tool. But guess what? For every other parent who want to get started now, today is Saturday, you want to start tomorrow after you take a little nappy nap, and you want to start tomorrow, you want to start Monday after school, I want to give you some very practical tips about how you could engage journaling in your home now using the resources that you have. And the first tip I want to give you is to be consistent. I want you to remember that regular journaling, that time for the dialogue, that time for the writing, sometimes it takes practice. It takes practice for the parent to have the discipline and the routine to encourage their kids to do it. But it also takes practice and routine for the child to want to do it. And listen, I understand it might be a little bit of a pull and tug in the beginning, but with every other good thing, you keep at it and be consistent and you will see results over time. And remember, when we talk about results, we talk about increased understanding, the ability to be reflective, increase in confidence, improved communication between you and your child, and the opportunity to have increased communication between you and your school teacher, because now you're collecting data, right? The second tip I want to give you for journaling at home is to remember to give direction. Make sure your child has a clear understanding of what you expect. Don't just hand them a piece of paper, hand them a book, hand them the excellence journal and say, okay, right, go ahead and write. No. Talk it through. Make sure they're clear on their understanding about what is expected so they could give their best effort. Remember, with journaling, there is no right or wrong answer, but there is a place to engage the experience productively. Use writing prompts. The Excellence Journal gives you prompts, but let's say you're starting now, you're starting this evening, then you think about the questions. What do you want to know? What do you want to encourage your child to answer, to be reflective concerning? And don't be afraid to use free writing. Sometimes, as parents, we could take it for granted that children experience what for them are complex emotions. And so sometimes free writing allows the child just to write it out, to get it out their system, what they're feeling, what they're going through, especially that they're not in school, not within their regular framework. And so you want to give them the opportunity to express what they're experiencing and going through, so that way you can understand how to best help them. And no, mommies and daddies, that it's not just about giving them to write, but you want to review what they're writing. This is not a cutie pie journaling we're talking about here, where you're writing about, the thing, the ice cream parlor that make you blush. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about journaling where we are reflecting on our day's experience with our schooling and our ability to get our homework done and these learning experiences. So mommies and daddies, this is not private information to tuck in a corner. This is information you want to read, because again, remember, it's not a right and wrong. It's about understanding the student's experience. So you would know, is this something I could support at home? Is this something I need to talk to the teacher about? Is this something I need to get additional support from maybe a counselor, social worker, or some sort of a remediation center? You want to review what your child is writing. So you are now armed with the information you need to make a difference. And of course, last but certainly not least, encourage self-evaluation. Encourage your children, your child to be reflective, to think, so that when they go through their own journey, process over time, they're supposed to be able to come to you and say, Mommy, I was reading my journal and I realized that when I create the questions first, it makes it easier for me to answer the question, or whatever they might come to you to say. So remember, moms and dads, be patient, be understanding, and know that including journaling as part of the learning experience while we're schooling from home, in what I like to call these COVID recovery days, it can make a big difference in how the learning and the experience unfolds for your child. So, of course, I really appreciate all those who have tuned in. Thanks for the time to share. And I really trust that the information that I've just shared about journaling works well. And even as I step out, I want to take a quick moment and share just a short clip from a parent that would have had some experience and exposure to the Excellence Journal Student Study Guide for Self-Directed Learning.
Hi, I am Chanel Richards, proud mom of 3. I use the Excellence Journal to help track and also to have that dialogue with my kids on their day-to-day journey as they go along with their academics. It is a prompt to help us to understand what they achieve and what they understand from the day-to-day, as well as what challenges they have. But I can take every month I could track it, and I could even have that conversation with their teacher and say, this is the situation, this is where my child is, having difficulties, what can we do next? So it's a planning, it's a strategic way of knowing what to do next. I will recommend the Excellence Journal for all parents, especially when you want to keep that healthy dialogue with your kids.
Thank you, Pamela. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Alina. And just listening to her talk about that Excellence Journal, I myself, excited about the journal. And, I hope that parents, those that are listening in, that you will really make this investment, because it indeed is an effective tool. It is also an opportunity where parents can spend time and have dialogue with their children. So thank you so very much again to Miss Lewis for that presentation. And even as we continue our program, Reimagine Parenting Symposium, I continue to encourage you to share the links, and you can invite on Facebook, you can view us on YouTube as well. And remember, it's a free webinar, so feel free, come on in. This Excellence Journal, in addition to the presentation that was made previously, we have some great topics that are going to be coming up, and we have with us as we continue on in our program. At this time, I want to invite, and this gentleman, he is an educator, and he has been an educator of 10 years by both profession and passion. He also holds a Master of Education in the field of education technology and school improvement, through which effective contemporary leadership practices remain an area of interest. Of course, that person is Mr. Raul Hiralal, and he completed research on the technological leadership roles of principals in the local context. So at this time, we welcome Mr. Hiralal to make his presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Mrs. Lewis. Thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this parenting symposium this afternoon. Before I formally begin my presentation, I would like to express my congratulations to you on the publication of the Excellence Journal. I am certain that it is going to be a tool that really improves teaching and learning, and it reflects your continued contribution to education in this country. So thank you very much. Let's begin with all of the listeners with a bit of self-reflection. Make a real attempt to answer the following question in your mind. When you were a student, what were the challenges that affected your ability to study well? Really think about it. What are some of the answers? Maybe a lack of motivation, internal or external, a lack of strategic tools to make study easier, example, being unable to self-test, to manage time, procrastinating, dealing with limited resources. Maybe you didn't have a guide. Maybe you had to deal with a whole lot of work, meaning voluminous curricula. Possibly you were unable to connect with the material, even as far as being unable to make an emotional connection or being unaware of goals and how to even set them. How about just being plain lazy? That could be an answer, right? There are many reasons that may have been part of the answer to why we experience difficulty studying well or establishing an effective study routine. We have children of our own today, and what do we say to them? Do as I say and not as I do, or in this case, as I did. Our parental responsibility goes beyond this. Today, education has made a paradigm shift, and it will never return to what it was. Our children now learn entirely online or in blended or mixed models of online and face-to-face school. Yet, interestingly, the challenges they face to be able to study well remain relatively unchanged from our own experiences. Many of the answers we thought of earlier are similar to the issues being faced by our children today, and they can be exacerbated in this unmastered online environment. Amid these difficulties, as parents and as educators, our responsibility rests in being an effective guide in helping to create effective study routines. Today, let's attempt to provide a brief insight into how we can successfully manifest this role by examining the core elements that drive effective study habits and integrate the lessons that we learned from our own experiences, possibly. Thereby, let's empower ourselves as parents with tools to best fulfill this role. So think again of the answers to that first question. If we analyze them, we can discover that effective study routines can be described as having three core elements. One, time. Two, energy. And three, attention. Let's take each one in turn. Time. I have so much to do, and I wish I had much more time to do it. Don't we hear that from the children? As a matter of fact, we say it ourselves. Although we more often hear ourselves saying, all that time you have to be on the phone, but no time to pick up the book, right? That sounds a little bit more like us. Well, we may get in trouble with that today because the book is on the phone. Time management is an issue that directly impacts the establishment of effective study routines. Do not be mistaken that students are not hard pressed for time. They are bombarded with the demands of testing, multiple assignments for a host of subjects, SBAs for each one of them, projects. They are also sometimes faced with unreasonable deadlines. Regrettably, in this kind of environment, quality study time isn't given devoted effort, and completing homework and assignments get passed off as studying. Faced with a series of tasks calling for our attention at once, we need to develop the skill of prioritization. There are many practical tools that can help develop this. For example, David Allen suggests GTD, or Get Things Done. This approach uses a 5-step process of one capture, where children can note all the tasks, projects, and assignments they may have. To clarify, where we ask the question, are these items actionable or not? As well as, can some things on that list be done right away? 3, organize. This could be done under the headings of project, time, and context. 4, reflect. Here, children could review progress of the actionable items per week, and if they have set them, maybe even review their monthly short-term goals. And finally, 5, engage, where we roll up our sleeves and we get to work. So GTD is a time management technique that focuses on prioritization, because the items in the list are ordered from most actionable to least. This method is based on the philosophy that the brain functions better when it is thinking about ideas rather than just storing them. Therefore, GTD translates the many things to be done in the brain into an actionable list, so that space is freed up in the head to focus on the work itself. Another time management technique is an Eisenhower matrix, which is an urgent, important matrix. So we create a table of urgent, not urgent, important, not important, and fill in items in that box. This helps our children to focus on prioritization as well as priority items. Urgent and important tasks should be done immediately, like the SBA due tomorrow or the contribution to the group assignment that is yet to be done. But you will find that you could put many items under the category of not urgent but important, like studying for that test next week. These items call for planning. So in that example, for instance, the student could now plan to pay careful attention to how preparation for that test is going to be done, over how many days, and by using what strategies. Another technique that reinforces the connection between time and productivity is something known as the 1-3-5 approach. Here, the student picks one big thing, the main priority, 3 medium things, and 5 smaller things. So this kind of chunking helps us to chip away at the major thing that is likely to get us the best outcomes. For example, working on a subject that happens to be their closest exam. You might have heard of the story of the professor who went into the classroom with a bucket, some rocks, sand, and water, and he started to fill the bucket with rocks to the brim. And he asked the students if it was filled, and it appeared to be. He then went on and he filled sand in the bucket, and it filled the spaces in between the rocks, and he asked them again. And finally, he went on to fill water in the remaining spaces and posed a question about what would have happened if he didn't start with the rocks first. A technique like 1-3-5 rests on a similar idea, where to better manage our time, we address the bigger issues first. We are in the digital age, and so keep our children engaged. Tech tools can be integrated with these techniques, like digital diaries, online trackers, to-do list apps on our phones, and so on. So in summary here, effectively managing time will lead to the creation of effective study routines. So that's time. What about energy? Second core element. What if we've managed our time, but when it comes to making use of it, we don't have the energy? We are lethargic, we are sleepy, or the brain finds it very difficult to be alert. Quality rest is important to developing a good study routine. Quality implies an appropriate amount of sleep and at appropriate times. It also means rest away from phones and tablets and the electromagnetic frequency that these devices tend to generate and that impact our quality of sleep. So to maximize the energy to make for an effective study routine, it means to cultivate lifelong habits like these. To further maximize this, when we study, proper eating habits play a fundamental role for energy. Students have to be encouraged to eat at appropriate times and to consume nourishing foods. Children must also be taught how to regulate snacking. This should comprise brain and body enriching items. Just explore the biology online and you'll find many examples of types of foods that are welcomed. But 1, the quality of the food that we eat. 2, how much we eat. And 3, the times that we eat will have a cumulative effect on the quality of our thoughts. And we know the adage, we are in fact what we eat. Food directly impacts the nature of our thinking, and studying is nothing but mental work. So as parents, particularly in the online environment, we have to be vigilant to guard against habits like unhealthy snacking while studying. These do nothing for an effective study routine. Yes, snacking while studying and consumption of water is important to fuel the brain, but quality cannot be compromised. Effective study routines have to be encouraged by good nutrition and exercise that maximize these energy potentials. But we are all aware that these habits don't develop miraculously. They take time and effort to take root. We have to consider energy as well in terms of when we study. If we are attempting to create an effective study routine, experiment a little with timing in order to determine when we are most effective. Some enjoy the quiet and the focus that early morning studies bring. There are, in fact, age-old benefits to this. If you've ever visited a monastery, for example, you'd know a great deal of attention is placed there on mental work and the development of focus. And there's a running theme, meaning that all of the residents arise early in the morning, and these times tend to be reserved for mental work, be it quiet study, be it reading, be it meditation, and so on. So support a culture of experimentation. Work with the child to understand what works best in terms of when he or she studies. But be mindful that what works best is not necessarily what is the easiest. It very rarely is. So we reiterate that in order to improve the energy available for an effective study routine, lifelong habits must be fostered. Finally, we come to attention, that third core element. So we've taken the time and the energy into account, but study becomes ineffective if we have managed to devote time and have energy, but we can't keep our attention on the task at hand. This is another skill that requires cultivation and repetition to become firmed up as a positive habit. In the online environment, students are faced with so many distractions. It's exponentially increased, be it the ping of the social media right next to them, or the many communication tools to chat with friends who very likely, let's face it, have things that are much more attention grabbing to say than anything you attempt to study in front of you. So an effective study routine is one whereby attention is focused on the task at hand for maximum productivity. The Pomodoro technique is a great tool to increase productivity. Here, activities are broken into 25-minute chunks separated by 5-minute breaks. The intervals are called the Pomodoros. The student can set a timer for 25 minutes, and when it rings, a check mark is placed on the paper. A 5-minute break is then taken, which is best taken away from the space set aside to study. And following this, the process is repeated. After about 4 or so Pomodoros, a longer break of about 30 minutes can be taken. So this technique helps us to apply directed effort in that 25-minute slot, knowing that a break is pending. It balances quantity and quality because the brain only needs to focus for a set amount of time. There are techniques similar to this, like the 52-17 method. Here, the clock is set for 52 minutes, work for that time, and take a break for 17. Some students might find this useful if they need to apply a little more time than 25 minutes, or they're in a zone, as they say, or they have a vibe going on, somewhat of an uninterrupted workflow, right? But be mindful. You see this thing called attention, be it for 25 minutes or 52 minutes or any amount of time, it has a very sneaky enemy, and that enemy is distraction. It will appear easily. encourage our children to keep a distraction journal. So whatever thoughts clutter the mind while we attempt to focus, it can be written down. So we declutter the brain with those things and free up space again for the attention on the task at hand. But again, remember, the brain is a muscle and practice makes perfect. These ideas require regular application for any kind of real benefit to be arrived. In this new online environment, student burnout is a real issue. Lack of interest occurs. There's no attention on the material. This could be because of lack of engagement. Maybe when the virtual lesson is delivered, there is no consideration to the social aspect of learning that goes along with it. So the student lacks a real connection in the form of an interest or desire or even a love for the subject matter. And parents, this is a dangerous situation. Because even as adults, our attention does not want to rest on something that we have no interest in, that we have no connection to. Here's where we have to use study tips to breathe some life into the content and take studying beyond merely reading. Encourage your children to write and rewrite material via note-taking apps or online presentations that they make. Let them create concept maps with online mapping tools. Let them generate summaries with flashcard software. Let them teach someone else. So encourage a virtual study buddy. All of these tips help us to enjoy pulling apart the material, enjoy the components, and enjoy putting them together again. Teach the students how to be reflective learners. Let them self-test with the tech tools. Let them use the mass of self-generated and user-generated online quizzes. Let them use online simulations of labs, experiments, maps, virtual tours to assess where they feel their learning is. So we are talking about creating effective study routines, which is truly the cultivation of a lifelong habit of being an effective learner. As parents and as educators, we must guide the development of 1, strong time management techniques, 2, energy harnessing tools, and 3, attention focusing strategies. So we have covered only some of these areas here, and I really hope you will explore some of these 3 core elements further. We've also touched on the kinds of study techniques that could improve the engagement that children have with the material itself. And as we go forward, let us continue, please, to be the guide on this side. They may be growing up, but though many times it is unasked, our children count on us for the kind of support needed to develop these kinds of positive routines. I wish all of you the best as you go forward in reimagining your parenting and developing children into bastions of this nation. Thank you very much for your attention.
My name is Pamela Ramcharan, and I use the Excellence Journal. This is a wonderful book for parents, for children, for teens, and for young adults. And you know something? This book is a wonderful way by which parents can work together with their children when it comes to their schoolwork, and even also keeping on top and updated on their children's performance during the term. It is also a great opportunity for parents to interact with their children, spend more time with them as it comes to studying and even interacting with their children discussing what is going on in the school environment. And the journal is actually a chance for the children to let the parents know the difficulties that they may be facing, and for the parents as well, in getting that information from their children, they can have great interactions with the teachers to find out strategies and ways in which they can assist the children to improve in their work. And one part that I love so much about it is that planning at the beginning of the school term. I think that is wonderful, because as for me, being a parent of children who are into the secondary school system, it is sometimes difficult for us to keep up with what our children are doing, particularly for those of us who have more than one child. And planning before the beginning of the term with this journal, ensuring that we know what the children have to do, the work that will be covered during the term. And I am just recommending this Excellence Journal for each and every parent out there. Whether you are a parent, whether you are a guardian for your children, you will not regret it. And indeed, you will not regret that Excellence Journal. There you have the information with the ads on how you can access the journal, and it is available. And for parents and for students, it is quite an accompaniment to not just sitting and going through and studying with your children, but they get to write, you get to monitor them, you get to see what is going on in the school environment, and interacting with the teachers as well. So I highly again recommend it, that you get that Excellence Journal by this first-time author, and we are indeed hoping that we see many more publications coming from her. So as we continue our Reimagine Parenting Symposium, we have another guest with us this evening, and that is, of course, Mr. Roel Rollocks, and he will be presenting on approaches to engaging positive school collaborations. Now, Mr. Rollocks has been involved in education for the past 15 years and currently teaches at the Russell Latterby Secondary School in Morvah. Mr. Rollocks holds a BSc in International Relations from the University of the West Indies, Mona campus in Jamaica, an associate degree in Industrial Relations from the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies, and a diploma in Industrial Relations from the Arthur Lockjack Global School of Business. He has also held several positions in the past, including that of Tutor District Field Officer for Port of Spain for 7 years, where he treated with teacher grievances and issues in all schools within the district, from Malik Secondary School to Caranash Primary. Mr. Rollocks was also a member of the Industrial Relations Committee. He is currently pursuing his law degree and is an industrial relations private consultant with Millennium Consultants Limited. Let's welcome Mr. Ronaldo Rollocks as he makes his presentation.
Pleasant good afternoon to everyone, to the viewers, listeners abroad, on the internet, on all social media platforms. Well, we're going to wrap this thing up very nicely this afternoon. And we begin with a saying by George Augustin Santayana, who is a Spanish essayist, poet, and novelist. He said, "A child educated only at school is an uneducated child." So George set the background there for us. in letting us understand that it is a tripartite relationship that takes the child through the education process. In that relationship, we have the parent, the child, and the teacher. We have three people who are very, very important in that relationship. Mark Twain added to the discussion, and Mark said, I was never one to let schooling get in the way of my education. So, right from the start, we understand that there's a big difference between schooling and education, and we should not always use the term synonymously because there are different meanings to the two. But getting back to George and a child educated only at school, we definitely believe that the parents play a pivotal role in education in supporting the children and supporting the teachers. And there are benefits when this relationship is very, very healthy. Students become first and foremost, they become very highly motivated when there's a good parent teacher collab. They're self driven, they feel appreciated. We have enough data that tells us they improve behavior because there's a greater sense of accountability and attendance when the teacher and the parents establish a very good, healthy relationship. We also note that teachers do benefit. Research shows that parental involvement can free teachers to focus on on the task of teaching, which we all know is consuming, very, very consuming as it is. And when you have parents involved with the teachers can focus on the preparation of the lesson, the delivery, and all the science that comes with it. And conversely, as well, the teachers get to learn more about the students' needs because as the parent shares with the teacher can therefore cater because we must appreciate that teachers in this environment, especially in our school system, cater or have to cater for multiple intelligences, children of different attitudes, backgrounds, environments, and you have to pitch a lesson so that no child is left behind. That can be tricky with little information, with little contact from the parents, with little background. So, a good parent teacher relationship enables the teacher to better deliver. The teacher is able to be better sensitized about things that motivate or demotivate the students, vice versa. So, we see plenty benefit in establishing a very good and healthy parent-teacher relationship. So we said the students benefit, the teachers benefit, and well, you parents get to benefit, seeing that your child is moving through this education system, achieving their goals, that gives a deep sense of pride in your children and yourself as parents. We encourage teachers all the time to give some unsolicited positive comments, some UPCs to parents about their child and their child's progress. But as parents, we also have to appreciate that that must also be balanced with a dose of truth and reality, which is sometimes very difficult to digest because everybody wants to hear that their child is in the top 10 and the top five. And rightly so. We are high achieving parents and we want the best for our children. But often enough, teachers have to balance between encouraging parents and letting parents know what the situation is and what the options are. How do we do this? We do this through, again, we began talking about a tripartite relationship. We talk about the student, the teacher, the parent. We're going with three again. We're going with three C's. Our first C is communication. We do this by setting goals, set a channel for communication between you and the teacher, and it must be clear and timely. And on this point, we must advocate, boundary setting as well. Because of the information age, it could become overwhelming. Some of the text messages and our effort to communicate. Sometimes we can, go overboard one way or the other. Some parents complain about homework all over the day, all over the night. Some teachers complain that some parents don't, you know, sign off at different times. So we must manage this relationship with all the tools we have available to us. We don't want to burden anyone on either side of the coin. We want to respect parents' privacy. We want to respect teachers' space as well. So we must set goals for communication, set a channel, whether we take an email, or Miss I'll call you, Miss I'll send you a text, Miss I'll send you a WhatsApp, mommy, you could come in to see me. We set a channel and must be clear and timely. Our next C is consistency. Parents, we must know that, as established by the other speakers as well, children learn through repetition, structure, routines, and support. These are key in establishing good and healthy parent-teacher student relationships. Collaboration is our final C. We always advocate in education a very collaborative approach, problem solving, student centered, solution oriented. And this must be met with a lot of follow up. So we see again, there are benefits for all involved when we have healthy student, teacher, parent relationships, especially given in the present scenario. Parents will appreciate that the COVID situation has exposed us to a lot of things that happen behind the scenes in education that we may not have been aware of and taken for granted. You're now at a situation where you have to be actively involved, in your child's education, which is a relationship we crave in education, where parents continue to dialogue, they continue to communicate, and they continue to share, and the information goes back and forth in a very quick manner now, because we're using all the platforms that give instantaneous communications and all these Zoom sessions that the children participate in. So, just to reiterate, there are benefits for all in a healthy student teacher parent relationship: the communication parents, the consistency parents, and the collaboration. Those are the three C's that we need to foster a very good relationship that will result in an excellent education system.
We want to thank Mr. Rollocks for that informative presentation as he looked at engaging positive parent-teacher relationships through the three C's: communication, consistency, and collaboration. And of course, we would have heard from Mr. Roel Hiralal as well. At this time, we want to go into the question and answer segment, where we will be hearing from the panelists as they answer your questions that you can post on Facebook or even on the YouTube as well. You can post those questions for us, and we will be able to answer those for you, as we have several questions that are already coming in. And this one posed by Mr. Roel Rollocks. And the question is, can the student journal help our students with prioritizing? And I think it's a question that we can direct to Miss Lewis, because it's asking here about the student journal. Can it help our students with prioritizing? Miss Lewis. All right, Miss Lewis, we are not, can you please check your mic? Maybe there is a little
Yes.
bit of an issue with it. All right, so we're
Yes.
hearing
Are we
you clearly now.
together?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I was saying that indeed it can help with planning, because simply when we look at it, we spoke earlier about prompts and templates and having that sort of structure. And I know Mr. Hiralal, he spoke about some structure as well. And what the Excellence Journal does is that it allows parents to do termly planning, monthly planning, and weekly planning. So, because of this, it allows you to prioritize, and even piggybacking off of something Mr. Hiralal said when he spoke about understanding the difference between what is urgent and what is important. And for the things that are important, we want to make sure we plan for them. And so, through the templates and prompts that are provided in the Excellence Journal, students and parents definitely are helped with prioritizing.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lewis. And of course, keep your questions coming. We have another question as well. And remember, you can pose those questions on Facebook and the YouTube channel as well. So this next question comes in from Ms. Shepherd, and it is this. Since online school has started, we have seen an increase in the stress levels of students, some of which resulted in suicidal behaviors. How can parents help ease the stress levels of their children? And this one, I would like to ask Mr. Rollocks if he can answer this particular question dealing with the stress levels of students. How can parents help their children?
Well, one rule of thumb is that we must afford children some downtime, some off screen time where they are not engaged with the devices. We have been noticing that we're realizing that some children fall asleep with the device and wake up with the device. Because we engage in education via technology now, distance learning, we would want to recommend that parents sometimes you have to take away that device, all things being equal. Otherwise, you'd find the children on it for school, they're on it for recreation, they go to bed with it, and it could become very stressful. I mean, in terms of for the eyes, I know some people are complaining now about the children and their eyes and that engagement. So we really have to detach. That's the message. We must allow for our students and our children to detach from the social media platforms and all the technology and find other forms of recreation and other forms of engaging and be able to engage verbally, orally with their parents, with their peers, with their siblings, and not always be on this device 24 hours.
All right. Thank you so very much, Mr. Rollocks, for that response. I pray that that was helpful to the parent. And another question that we have coming in is, when can a student find the time to do additional revision when they are online from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m.? Then they have homework and projects to submit. And I'm going to ask Mr. Hiralal if he can answer this question.
Certainly, thank you for that question. That's a very real situation that exists. It's something that I alluded to in the presentation as well. And it tends to exponentially increase as the children go higher and higher in their classes. I think there has to be some level of structure implemented in a consistent program of work at home. Uh, Home has become school, and we are now in a space where we have to institute structure that wasn't previously there. And structure takes some time to get used to. So there has to be sort of consistent, regular practice. A study timetable is an age-old technique that helps. Prioritizing what has to be studied and breaking it down into the times that could be devoted to it. And maybe looking at some innovative ways in which those areas that have to be studied can be approached might all help to reduce the burden of having to consider studying in addition to homework and projects.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Hiralal. As your questions continue in, we have another question, and it is asking, the parent is asking, what guidance can you provide for parents and children who are not tech savvy and are trying to adapt to online learning? So, guidance for parents and children who are not tech savvy and they are trying to adapt to online learning. I'm going to open the floor so any one of our guests can answer this particular question.
I would actually reach out and I would remind parents to approach it from a solution oriented point of view. A lot of times we find that we are overwhelmed and we are hitting a lot of stumbling blocks to overcome simply because we approach situations from a perspective of, I can't, it's not possible. And I'll give a really easy example. Like I was sharing, a lot of parents have this concern earlier in the year. Oh, we need laptops. Where am I going to find these thousands of dollars to buy laptops? I need to log on to Microsoft Teams or Google Classroom, whatever they're using. And, I was sharing with parents that you don't have to spend thousands of dollars. The reality is, if push comes to shove and you need to figure it out, there are ways and places you can go as simple as going from store to store, getting information, getting advice. I even shared with a couple parents this really neat tablet set that came with a keyboard and a whole case, and it was costed at $850. So here it is, parents were looking to figure out how to get $4, 5, $6,000 for a laptop when this same device costing $850 could have worked the same way. What's the difference? Information. So for parents who are feeling, listen, I am not tech savvy, listen, our road in life is to learn and to develop. And if we choose to accept that and challenge ourselves to say, hey, this is new, I might not be familiar, but I'm willing to learn. Listen, the same way we learn a new recipe for pilau, the same way we learn to bake a cake, the same way we learn to fix, to bleed the oil from the vehicle, the same way we learn to cut grass, is the same way that if we chose to, we could learn how to adapt using technology to support our children. So I'm not saying it will be convenient, and especially for older parents who really not accustomed to dealing with technology, and a cell phone was hello, goodbye, click. We understand that it's not the most convenient of options, but what I'm encouraging you is to seek help. There are stores that will help you for free, because chances are you might be buying a device. Your teachers are there to help you. Connect with other parents, whether in your class or in your PTA, and say, hey, what can we do? Reach out to your school administration and say to your principal, hey, some of the parents are having some challenges. Is there anything that you can do? Can you set up a separate session somehow online or in a socially distant space where someone can teach us how to do these things? The big encouragement I'm giving to parents who feel they're not tech savvy and they cannot make things happen is to know that is only a figment of your thought pattern. And if you were to arise and decide, listen, this is not convenient, I don't like it, but I choose to make myself available to give the best effort, and to doing that, no, you could set a good example for your child, you will have a very different experience. And of course, back to you, Pamela. I don't know if any of the other panelists have any thoughts to share on that.
Any other thoughts, Mr. Hiralal or Mr. Rolox, on
We've
guidance
had
for
a,
parents?
sure,
Mr. Hiralal.
certainly. We've, to follow through with what Mrs. Lewis is saying there, we've had very similar experiences with the transition to online learning. You will naturally have parents who are adept at technology, and you'll have the parents and the grandparents who help at home, who may not be able to cope with the demands that these new skills call for. Uh, what it boiled down to was having a strong support team at the school, and being having that culture where you feel comfortable to reach out for help, And there's a team of persons who are not necessarily professionals or experts at it, but are willing to support the group as a whole and to be able to answer a call at 8 in the night and say, well, this is how you upload the assignment, or to follow through with an email to help you troubleshoot something in your computer. So it's about creating that team. And it was really interesting to see how people grew exponentially in those skills in a short period of time as well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hiralal. And the questions continue to come in. And this parent is asking, how would you encourage someone with a child who learns differently to accept the difference? I want to repeat that question. How would you encourage someone with a child who learns differently to accept the difference? And I would like to ask Mr. Rollocks if he can answer this question.
Well, that is why we need strong parenting relationships, because education or the classroom setting portrays to the child that everybody learns the same way, and they will not understand that as children. You also have to get your child or your children to believe in options, right? And there are different options as far as education is concerned, especially even with the technology. There are different options for online learning, whether it be Zoom or Microsoft Teams or other options, so that the children don't become too disheartened and discouraged if they don't. And the technology allows you to do the same thing in a different way. Yeah? That's a good thing about the technology. It is not what we traditionally know, the pen and the book. And so there are differences even in the technology. We must expose the children to it and get your child to understand that, even though people are doing it this particular way, they're uploading it this way, they're doing this way. The technology allows you to be very creative, and teachers and all allow you to be very creative in the things that you do. So that is a discussion that you must have with your children. Otherwise, we understand that the bar for online learning is very high, the digital bar is very high, and they may not be able to maneuver the device. Like anything, as all the other presenters said before, it will come over time. We adapted to the ATM machines, and we adapted to other things that we do now normally and we take for granted. But if you talk to people who, older people or even younger people who first went to use the ATM machine, you would laugh. You would laugh. So just keep encouraging the children. And that parent-child discussion and relationship is important, because children can become disenchanted, disengaged, they could become depressed. So you have to constantly speak to your child and ask them, as Miss Lewis said, what are you trying to achieve? What is the goal? And let them craft their own solution, and you would be surprised what these children come up with.
I want to thank you so much, Mr. Rollocks, for answering that question. And at this time, of course, we have come to the end of our question and answer segment. And before we close off, we would like to get the final thoughts. I'll start with you, Mr. Hiralal, for this Reimagine Parenting Symposium. Your final thoughts.
Thank you very much. Nobody teaches us how to be parents before we become parents necessarily. That is not the norm. However, parenting isn't something that can be ad hoc. It's not something that you should attempt to shoot from your hips with, because we are entrusted with a most auspicious task. And it's one that we should, even if we become parents by chance, treat quite seriously. We should recognize that we will make mistakes along the way, but there is a bigger picture at the end of the road. And being part of this symposium, listening in, sharing comments, and asking questions is a really excellent move to become better at that skill of parenting. And I just want to end by congratulating everybody for being a part of this.
So we thank you, Mr. Hiralal, for your final thoughts there. And we now move to Mr. Rollocks as he gives his final thoughts as we close our Reimagine Parenting Symposium.
Well, within this COVID time that we live, there's ample opportunity. And we have to get children to see things differently because things are different. So the cell phone is no longer a toy. The cell phone is a tool. Because the internet is a tool. Normally we use these things for entertainment, but it is now a major tool of learning. So those are different things that we have to teach children, how to research things themselves, how to go and look up themselves. Everything is on Google. As a matter of fact, if you think about it, now is the best time to study. We would have had to be writing tons and tons of notes, going in some library, trying to borrow some book. I remember one of my students challenged me during a class, and I was asking him for his Spanish dictionary, which if you did any languages, you know there are some very big dictionaries. And he was saying to me, sir, there's Google, right? But we have to relook maybe our cell phone use when school comes out. But really and truly, the need to tote around all these heavy books and store information. We have to get children to see things differently, challenge them, and they will innovate, they will invent. And we ourselves as adults have to, by force, we also have to adapt in it for us to be able to help the children. The train leave the station, we have to. There's no turning back now. It will only get to be a more integral part of our education system as we go along.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rollocks. And finally, we will hear from Ms. Lewis. And even as you give your final thoughts, we also would like to get information for those parents that would like to have this excellent journal on how they can access it. So please, your final thoughts.
I want to encourage parents to keep in mind that the name of this webinar is not by accident. It's called the Reimagine Parenting Symposium. And it's because at this stage, more than ever before, we have to do just that. We must reimagine parenting. We must reimagine the way we communicate with our kids, the way we facilitate their learning, their development, the way they engage their schooling, because now we're schooling from home. We have to reimagine parenting on many levels. And I believe that one of the things that each of the persons on the panel this evening mentioned is the importance of collaboration, the importance of research, the importance of reaching out. And I think underlying to all of those essential points is the importance of being open to change and open to embracing the steps that are needed to achieve whatever goals that are set. Indeed, this symposium is really awesome, and I'm so happy to be a part of it as a commemoration for the book launch, because the book as a tool is really about supporting parents. And so even as we have this Reimagine Parenting Symposium, it's just a reflection of the experiences to come, where we look at excellence in parenting. We look at how we could reimagine the way we work with our kids, come out of some of the ways or the traditional approaches that may not be supporting the goals that we have, and work together to say, let's know that we can do this. So of course, what I would encourage, Pamela, you mentioned how do people get connected, but really what I would encourage people to do to keep it real simple is on Facebook, you can look up the Excellence Journal, like and follow that page, because we have our Excellence in Parenting program that is coming starting April. We have the Excellence in Study Skills program that is coming starting in April. And of course, the Excellence Journal is being used as a tool in support of this. Parents who are part of the program are going to benefit from webinars and training sessions and online material that is going to be able to support them. Because the goal is this: the same way your kids have their schools to support and provide this wealth of information as learners, the Excellence in Parenting initiative is putting itself forward to be able to provide a wealth of information to you, mommies, daddies, aunties, and uncles, to help you understand how you can better support your children from home. So once again, thank you to the panelists that have been here. We all shared in such a wonderful evening. Thank you for those who stayed live with us, and even great appreciation goes out to those who would look at the replay, who would share this video and the edited version of these videos as encouragement to others who couldn't view live but would definitely benefit. So great appreciation to all involved, and of course thank you to you, Pamela, for being such an awesome host as usual. So back to you as we close.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lewis, and thank you to all the panelists. And we have come to the end of our Reimagine Parenting Symposium. Remember, even when this broadcast is ended, you can share, and you can share this Excellence Journal, Reimagining Parenting. It is not what it used to be. It has changed, particularly in this world of technology that we now live in. So thank you to each and everyone for joining us. Until, of course, stay updated on the Facebook page, The Excellence Journal, as well as Alina Lewis. And she, of course, she is an educator, she is a success coach, and now she is an author. So thank you for joining us.